Hello, friends. It's Stephanie here, your host of the Only God podcast, sharing stories only God could write. And today on the podcast, we have Mike Bellini. And if I have to think about like a couple of overarching themes for this is one, how God works in unexpected ways, and also of a dad, how do we trust God with our children? And he shares an incredible story of how God worked through his daughter to really impact the life of he and his wife and really his whole family. So I'm excited for you to hear this episode with Mike Bellini. Hey, Mike.
Hey there. Good to see you again.
Good to see you, Mike Bellini. Welcome to the Only God podcast. And I'd like to, before we dive into like my questions, is I would love for you to introduce yourself to the audience.
Okay. As you mentioned, Mike Bellini. I've been married for 28 years, two children, just recently graduated from college. I've been involved in church ministries, gosh, for more than half my life now, which is great. In various capacities, I helped lead a high school boys ministry at our previous church, taught Sunday school classes, adult classes, kids classes, and uh, was a chair of church council at one point, and most recently, am prayer coordinator at our current church, one of the prayer leaders there. So I've written and published two books. First is on marriage. That has been, I would say, marriage and family has been a primary passion of mine for the last longer than quarter century now, because I've been married over 28 years. So that and like I said, in prayer. And the second book I wrote was with you at your prompting, and we wrote a prayer book together. So that's yeah, I guess that's about me in a nutshell.
Wonderful. And just two comments. One, when you said that you guys had been married for 28 years, I was like, I remember when you celebrated 25 and it seemed last year. And so to hear
Crazy.
like those 3 years just went like that because I remember being
Flying.
so excited about your 25th anniversary and
Yes.
the celebration of that. And then I do want to add too is you have like a corporate job. So I know you talked about like
True.
all your ministries. And so I just want the listeners like to see like you're juggling your family,
Yeah.
being a husband, a job, your ministry, and then like writing on the side. So that's cool.
Yes, my
Uh,
wife would say I probably should put a couple of those balls down
right.
periodically.
I think we might have talked about that once or twice too.
Yeah, working on it.
It so I start with all of my guests is at least right now the ones that I'm bringing on that I know is like our only God connection. I feel
Yeah.
like it is only God that we know each other, and so I would love to hear your standpoint of like how we got connected and how God brought us together, and then some of the cool things that we've been able to work on.
Yeah. So here's what's interesting, and I'll ask you to fill in any blanks that I might miss too,
Yeah, I
because I
will
feel
too.
over time, if we don't remember or and record these God stories and these God moments, it's so easy. They're so easy to forget, And
Yes.
so I mean, haven't really like written this down, but I kind of know our story and some of the steps, but fill in anything that I might miss. I first saw you, and I'll never forget this. First saw you on a Zoom call, and it was not long after you had been had your spider bite experience, had been in the hospital. And for people listening, I mean, it was serious. You had a serious reaction to this, and uh, a lot of health issues. And so I first saw you as you were talking about that story on a Zoom call. And it's interesting, Stephanie, because there are a few people in your life that when you see them, they give off this energy that is just infectious, and it gives you such a good feeling, and you feel it's like you not like that person necessarily, but you kind of feel like you do. That's you in a nutshell, right? You did that on that Zoom call, and it was like this. There was something about you. There was a spirit about you that was infectious, and So fast forward, I don't know how long, I think it was the following year is when God called me to write my first book. And the reason I say it that way is because I had sworn 30 years ago I would never write a book because I tried and I stopped after a few
Never
chapters.
tell
I'm like,
God what you're going to do, right?
never, ever am I going to do that. And so he called me to write a book, and I delayed. I said, "Look, I'll give it. I'll wait 6 months, and in 6 months, if the desire is still in my heart, then I'll do it." So it was there. So I did it, went through that process, and then for anyone who's written a book, the first one particularly, I get to the point of getting ready to get it published, and I had no idea what I was doing. Had no idea how to go about it. I'd already put a lot of time, effort, and resources into it, and kind of wanted to do it right. Lo and behold, I heard you on another podcast, or heard you on a podcast at that point, and you were talking about your writing experience and the business that you have in helping writers coaching as well as helping with publishing. And I was just like, I need help publishing. So I jumped on your website and looked at things that you do and the services that you have. And I was like, she's not gonna work with me, but I'm gonna reach out anyway. I didn't know you at that point.
Yeah,
Actually,
no, we had
we had
only,
never
and I
met.
think that call was Chad Wright's Resurrected
It
call.
was. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I remember that because he called me in the hospital and prayed for me. And so you even think
Yes.
about me just showing up on that call and like being able to share what God had done in my life in that moment and being part of that community and for you to be there, like the chances, it was a very
Hmm.
small group at that time. I don't know how it is now, but like at the time, it was a really small group.
It
So you think
was.
of
Yeah.
the millions of people in the world and we end up on one little call together.
Exactly, and these are kind of the details, right, that we forget. So like that call happens every week, and it's been going for, I guess it's been 5 years now,
Yeah.
and I may have been on that for maybe 3 times
Yeah.
in that entire time, and one of those happened to be when you were there and sharing your story. So then I hear you on, actually, I think it was then on his Chad Wright's podcast.
Yeah, the 3-7
Fast
project.
forwarding over a year later,
Yeah.
hear you on his podcast telling about your writing, your services, all that kind of stuff. I get on your website. I'm like, she's not gonna. I mean, this is the long shot of long shots. But I reached out to you, and I mean, I honestly I don't remember the initial interactions or conversations or whatnot, but you were willing to help me through it. We got to agree on like, okay, what do I need most and all this kind of stuff. I think we did monthly coaching calls, things like that. And Stephanie, I can't tell you the level of anxiety that just dropped when you said that you'd be willing to work with me on this. Because
Thank you.
again, not knowing anything, I'm like, oh, thank goodness I have somebody that knows what they're doing and will help me through this. And not only that, but just somebody who's so good-hearted and um, such such pure intentions was just phenomenal. And the rest is kind of history. I mean, you helped me through publishing that book. I remember like when the book came out, I did an Instagram live, and you were one of a couple of people that I had on that Instagram live. We were talking
Yeah.
about the experience. So this is only a few short months after you and I really first connected, and I felt like we were old friends by that point. It was just amazing. And of course, I don't know if this is sort of part of the story that you consider, but fast forward again, what, probably another year later, and you reached out to me and said, "Hey, I've seen the prayers that you post every week. I post the prayer once a week on Sundays. I see those prayers. I think you should put them together in a book." And I was like, "Okay,
I think you ignored me.
sounds good. Sounds good. I hope I didn't completely ignore you, but I may have just said I'll think about it. Hopefully, at least I said that. I don't know, but yeah, but I did. I mean, I was just completely ignored that prompting. And then a few months later, he came back again with an offer, and I was just like, dang, she's serious about this. And so I need to really give this some thought. And then here you go. There's the prayer book that we wrote together. And
Yeah.
here we are. It's
And
just,
here
yeah,
we
it's
are.
incredible.
And I think, there's what's so cool about, and I just want to remind people, and that's why I'm having people share their stories of like, connection is because I do think sometimes is we do forget what God has done and all the little details. And and like you said, is you go back to we met on this Zoom call and there wasn't a lot of people and I hadn't been on it that many times. You hadn't been on that many times. And then to think fast forward is then I go on a podcast and I happen to share and you had written your book. So that's one detail
Yeah,
I want to say is you had already written your book and it was very long, folks. It was very long. There was a lot of words in that first book. And I remember that's one of the first things we worked with. I was like, having the courage to be like, okay, you're gonna have to cut some of this out. And I think your wife Cindy was like grateful that I gave you some feedback that
yeah,
maybe she felt the same way, but as a
yeah,
spouse and a professional, and then that's the cool thing too because now to your point is we've done a book together, which I did not intend. I really felt like the Holy Spirit was prompting me to have you write that book because and if you're not following Mike Bellini, we'll put it in the show notes on Instagram, Facebook. Is he does put a prayer every Sunday. I try to share them when I see them. Is I was just like more people need to see this. More people need to. I just felt like you social media is kind of a moment in time sometimes, and
hmm
if we could capture some of these great prayers in a book for when people were in need or just didn't know what to pray or didn't never had prayed and saw this book whatever and so but then you kind of turned the tables on me and was like what if we do this together and I was like ooh I didn't really know if I wanted to do that, and but I think that was cool because it was the first collaboration project that I had worked on, and I really think only God too was in the details of that. We worked so well together and it was like we were not tied to like our own stuff. It was just like you would come up
hmm
with an idea and maybe go, "Hey, I think we should do this." And then I would come up with and it just seemed to work and let go of our egos it felt like and so that was cool and then I gotta add another thing is we've since seen each other we met twice in person you
yeah.
did mid-state mile and got to see you there and that was the first time I met you after we'd even published the books so we had never met this whole time which was crazy
Yeah,
and then we did Jesse Itzler's Driveway to Hell. And
yeah,
guys, that was a crazy night. And I got to meet Jonathan, and we all got
yeah.
to be a part of that race. So it's just fun, like how God has not only brought us together through books, but doing some endurance events together too, and
You,
having some fun.
and the thing is the more, like going back to what I said earlier, the more we talk about this, the more details I remember when we were writing the prayer book, my family was going through an extremely difficult season. And little did I know, and I shared this with you at the time, little did I know that I was going to need to kind of remind myself to pray and how to pray while I was going through that season. It's like I'm writing these prayers for other people at a time when I was as desperate or more desperate than I've ever been in prayer myself. Again, you can't make that timing up yourself, right? I mean,
Right.
it was just incredible. It was clear that we were supposed to be doing, at least I was supposed to be doing that at that time in that season.
Yeah. And I'm glad you remembered that detail because I think too it's a good example of what obedience looks like.
Yeah.
Of like you not really wanting to write that book, me not probably really wanting to do it, but being obedient to what both of us really felt like God was calling us to do and then you having to go through something so difficult and the timing if we wouldn't have if I wouldn't have been obedient to the prompting of the Holy Spirit and having the courage
Yeah.
it does take courage to go to somebody with sometimes a crazy idea and then a lot of times it's like if you don't get that answer but you still feel like that is what God is calling you to do is to go back and there is a balance in that but I don't know. So, and I just feel like you're right. I'm glad you remembered that because sometimes when we say yes to, when we are obedient and say yes, we don't know how God's going to, use that later, what we're going to be going through.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
exactly.
cool. I love it. Yes. Well, and do you have a copy? So I know I've got a copy. So this is our Uncommon
Uh-huh.
Prayers book, which I love. And it's always been a good conversation starter when I'm at events.
Yes.
And you have
It's actually
Ultra
all of
Marriage.
these green
Yeah.
books behind me. And yep, there's my first book, Ultra Marriage,
Which
the
I
blue as
love.
well.
I love giving that as a
Yeah,
wedding gift. I think
got
it's
one for
great
you.
as a wedding gift. And I've gotten to know
Yeah,
Mike's wife, Cindy. And really, you think about somebody once they get engaged or getting married, or if you know people that are struggling in their marriage, it's a great book. And what I love too about your marriage book is it's real. Like you're
yeah,
not fluffing, like you're real, you're vulnerable. And I think sometimes you don't get that from people. Is it's kind of like, oh, we're all like everything's great and hunky dory, and we've had an amazing marriage the whole time. And so that's one thing I appreciate about
or
your
I've found
marriage.
too that it's almost the opposite to where it's like so dark. It's like, man, why are
Right.
you two, why are you still married? This is horrible. And
Yeah,
I'm
it's a
not to
great
say, and
balance. You're right.
I say that in jest
Yes, I
because I
know.
do believe in, I'm an advocate for marriage and I do believe in doing everything you possibly can
Mhm.
to make it work. Not only make it work, but make it as best as it could be. And that was my focus for my book was
Yeah.
we haven't had an easy marriage. Nobody has an easy marriage, but it's kind of, I hope, inspiring people to make it better, regardless of where you're at. Whether it's
Yeah.
bad, make it better. If it's good, make it great. If it's great, figure out ways to continue to climb that mountain together and make it even better.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Let's pivot a little bit, and I want to
Yeah,
hear. So I don't know this, people. I don't know what Mike's going to talk
that's
about, and that's one thing I'm like kind of doing with my guest is some of them I have like a little idea of what I've prompted them, of what I've seen God in their life. But for Mike, I don't know what he's going to talk about. And so I want to hear like your only God story that you want to share.
yeah. Okay. So I'm going to share this is fairly recent and something that started a few years ago and is really continuing. We're walking through something right now that we know God put in place, and so I'm gonna kind of go back a few years because it's again it's interesting when you start to pay attention and you come to the realization that there really aren't any or many coincidences, and you open your eyes to the that okay, I know God's hand is working. I got to open my eyes to it. And then you start to connect. It's hard to connect the dots in the moment, but as you look back on it, it's like, oh yeah, that happened. It kind of like our story. Oh yeah, then that happened. And then that happened. That was strange. And then that happened. So um, basically, okay, so I'll go back to 2020 and I'll make long stories short. So there's a lot more details to this, but 2020, my wife and I left a church that we had been in 15 years. Our kids grew up there and it was just time. Our kids were grown, going off to college. The church was going in a direction that we didn't necessarily agree on certain values, and we had given it our best shot. Like I was chair of church council for the last couple of years, trying to help steer it. But anyway, we, just decided it's time to move on. Um, this is going to relate, but I'll share this too. So, but about the same time, my daughter was visiting colleges, and from the time she was 8 years old, she wanted to be a baker until she came home her junior year of high school. At the end of her junior year in high school, we had already started touring culinary schools, and she said, "I want to be a doctor." And we were just like, "What? What?"
Baker, doctor.
She said, "Yeah." She's like, "I read a book and I've had some experience working in a bakery, and it's changed my perspective on life and things. And I want to pursue med school." So we completely changed our whole college search process. Started frantically looking for schools with medical programs. We live in the southeast, and there was one college in the southeast that had the exact program that she wanted. The unfortunate thing was it was one of the more expensive options on her
Of
list.
course.
So we toured the several schools in the southeast, right? Just imagine schools in Southeast Conference. We toured a couple of schools in the state of Tennessee, which is where we live. And we visited Auburn University, which we had been to 3 years earlier with our son and loved it. But he decided to go to a smaller school, understandably. So we walk on the campus of Auburn University, and it was heyday there, which, if you haven't been to Auburn on heyday, imagine like Disneyland or Disney World is supposed to be the happiest place on earth, except for heyday at Auburn University, because they have the band is out and cheerleaders are out, and they have food trucks and all kinds of things set up, and music is blasting, and everybody's walking around with a smile on their face going, hey, that's what heyday is. It's, hey. And we walked onto the quad, and I was just like, this is just not fair. This is not, I'm thinking dollar signs are in my head, right?
Right, yeah.
But it was, my daughter looked at us and she was just like, I think I'm home. And so, but we had learned, our family, Cindy and I, my wife and I, learned a decision-making process years ago that we used several times when making big decisions. So we actually sat down as a family, went through the process, let our daughter actually lead the process.
Wow.
And we were just like, let's see where the chips lie. So we went through the whole process. And again, kind of that long story short, all of us were thinking, yeah, Auburn University is where you need to go. It's the most expensive option for us, but we'll, we kind of came up with the plan of, you'll go for the first year and we're going to exhaust all of our opportunities for scholarships. You could be an RA, which would get some of your room and
Right.
board paid for, things like that. So we went with that, kind of with that mentality. And her first week of school there, she went early for a week of service. She met some people that go to a church in Auburn. She started going to the church her first week there, and that turned into what I consider kind of a spiritual awakening for her.
Yeah.
She had grown up in the church with us, believer, but she really began to understand what a relationship with Jesus
Yeah.
means and what it's
No
like
longer
there. And it
religion,
was
like something
amazing.
my parents have. This is what I've been doing with
Exactly.
my parents. I'm on my own now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, again, without really remembering a lot of the details or talking about a lot of details, things just happened that fall, that first fall of her freshman year, that were just like, well, that's confirmation that she needs to be. That's confirmation she's where she needs to be. Things just clicked. She met people that gave her opportunities and things like that. Not financial opportunities per se,
Right.
right? But just opportunities, and things were again, things just fell into place. As a parent,
Mhm.
you can't ask for anything more. And the greatest part of it was her spiritual growth in this whole thing. So
Right.
again, kind of fast forward a couple years after that, even, right? We're still not settled in a church, my wife and I. We had been attending a certain church that we liked, and had really gotten affiliated with a little bit over really the course of several years, but weren't involved like we were involved in our previous church, and we really wanted that. And we got to a point at the end of 2023. So this is 3 years after we left our previous church. At
Yeah.
the end of 2023, and we were like, man, if there was ever a church in our area in Nashville, Tennessee, that was like the church our daughter's going to, that's where we would go. Stephanie, I kid you not, 1 to 2 months later, no longer than 2 months, we hear about an interest meeting that the lead pastor and the leaders of the Auburn church are having in Nashville to
Wow.
gauge the interest of having a satellite church in offshoot in Nashville. And we were just like, what? What is what? Um,
Only God.
so within that time frame, the people, some of our closest friends and from our older church that we had been to, like I said, for 15 years, had broken off and started their own church, and it had been inviting us. We were like, let's just go. We haven't seen these people in a while, and it was fantastic seeing people. Right? Yeah. Anyway, I won't really go into that too much, but it was great seeing people.
Yeah.
It was like, man, we are back at a church where we know people and people know us, and this feels great. But something was off.
And it was comfortable. Like some was it? Like just not
Kind
comfortable
of.
from the standpoint of the something was off, but like when you know people and it's comfortable where it's like you know people, you have relationships, you don't have to work at getting to know them, you kind of know everybody's rhythm instead of going into some place
Yeah.
that's brand new and you're like, Okay, now we got to start at ground zero again.
Okay, so listen to this now. All right. So we go visit that offshoot church, and it's like it's really cool being around people we know, but the spirit wasn't
Hmm.
there in our heart,
Yeah.
right? There wasn't a spiritual connection. It was kind of almost like this worldly friend connection.
Hmm.
So something was off. Well, literally, I see someone someone who's pretty prominent in the Nashville community post on Instagram of all places, "Hey, Auburn Community Church Nashville is meeting at a coffee shop in Nashville. We're going to watch the service together. We're doing watch parties now." And I DM'd him and I was just like, "Hey, what time? Where is it? What's going on? You guys are actually meeting already?" Because I had heard about the interest meeting like a
Right.
month earlier. And he's like, "Yep." He DMs back, all exclamation points. "Yeah, 9:30. Come on, here's the address, all this kind of stuff." I'm like, man, this guy's excited. So what we had been doing, what my wife and I had been doing at that point was we were attending a service on Saturday evening at the church we had been going to for a couple of years, and then watching the Auburn church service at home
Oh, okay.
on Sunday mornings. So we were like, instead of watching it at home by ourselves, let's just go to the coffee shop and watch it with a bunch of other people. So we did. So we walked in within moments. We we recognized that the previous week we were at a church where we knew a lot of people and something felt off. We walked into this church and we knew nobody. We didn't know anybody. And we were like, this feels like home. It was
Whew, I just got chills.
a common spirit there, right?
Yeah.
And so
Mm.
I and so we start getting involved. I start a pro team there, right? And it's where I mean, at this point there were 40 people maybe 50 that were coming to this watch party. And kind of fast forward again, my wife and I have been super involved. The church has grown to probably 400 to 500 people at this point, and this is a year later. I guess the church has actually been officially an offshoot of that church for only less than a year, actually. Um, and things started happening like um, this difficult season that our family's been going through. Like my son needed a doctor. I shot a text to a couple of people that I had recently met at this new church and just said, "Hey," that I knew were kind of influential and they might be good resources. I was like, "Hey, looking for this type of doctor. If any of you know of anybody," boom, boom, boom. Right away, I got a couple of responses. Great references. Called them up, got them an appointment, and I'm like, that wouldn't have happened
Right.
a couple of months ago. Maybe part of it, and it's you start to see like you get to a point and something happens, a God moment happens. It's like, oh, maybe that's the reason why God put all of this in motion. And then something else happens like that, like getting a doctor right when we need it. It's like, well, maybe that's why all of this happened, so that we could get the help that we needed when we needed it. And then something else happens, and it's like, well, maybe that. No, it's like God is just continuing to do stuff and show that He started things in motion probably decades ago
Yeah.
that we are just now starting to see his fingerprint in some of this stuff. And I go back to that decision. This all, for us, it started with the decision for my daughter to go to Auburn University. If she hadn't done that, we wouldn't be where we are spiritually
But you
in
can
this church,
always
and neither
like
would she.
even go back, of her making the decision. It's like that's one thing I want to talk to God about. When I get to heaven, I have a lot of questions because it's like if your daughter would have decided to go into culinary and never went
Hmm.
to Auburn, like what's your path look like, and do you
Yeah,
still get to the doctor, do you still get to this church, or is
right.
there like that's one thing that I don't want to say keeps me up at night but is fascinating to me, because we have free will, but then also like I think I was reading in was it Romans today, and it was like God chooses, and and so it's I don't know what your thoughts are on that, and that's kind of a little sidetrack, but it's like you could keep going back on that story of if she would have chose culinary and not medical, would you have been at Auburn? Probably not.
Right.
I don't know.
Maybe, but probably not.
Yeah,
Probably not. We would probably still be kind of church shopping. I don't
yeah.
know.
Maybe.
But again, it's like at my age, I anticipated that I would be entrenched in a church that I've been in a while and making a difference. And yet we went to a church that was just, we're helping to church plant essentially. We're
Yeah.
not in charge, but we're all for whatever leadership positions we can take and whatever help we can get. Like literally on Sunday mornings when we started, we were meeting in an elementary school gym. So we would have to get there early and unload chairs from a trailer, bring them into the gym, get everything set up, get all the equipment set up. So, but it versus what I would have assumed I'd be like at this stage of my life of I'm attending an established church every Sunday and things are
Right.
rocking and rolling. We're rocking for the kingdom. The churches that we'd been to that are like that, we didn't want to be at anymore. And we found this one and we were like, yeah, what time can I get there? How early can I get there to unload chairs in 95-degree heat to bring them in so people have places to sit? Don't care. It's
Yeah.
just, this is where we need to be.
I love that because serving looks so different for everybody in every church. And even if you don't go to a church, service and giving. Um, but a lot of times it's not like easy and fun and it's sacrificial giving. But everybody coming together, so people have
Yeah.
seats. I don't know if you'll remember this or if you remember this story, but it just popped in my head. So I thought I would see if you could tell it. You and I were praying about no rain at my event. I'd asked you like pray for no rain, and then I think you guys had like a no rain. You had an event too where people were gonna have to
Oh
like
yeah.
park and like no rain. I don't know if you remember it, but it was like
Yeah.
somebody. There was like a text. I don't know. I thought it was a cool story. If you remember it and you can share, great. If not, that's fine. We'll move on.
Okay. Yep. I somewhat remembered again. This is the church that we're going to now.
Yeah.
The worship team and the head pastor came up to Nashville from Auburn and they did a worship night in Nashville. And so we didn't know what to expect, but yeah, we've got a text group of all the kind of like core leaders and serve team leads. And one of the people involved in parking was like, pray that God holds off the rain. And I was just like, who cares
Yeah.
about rain? Rain righteousness on us. And I actually put that scripture in the group text of, hey, if it's raining tonight, then let God rain righteousness down on us
Right.
and down on our city. And lo and behold, he ended up holding off the rain anyway, right? It held off just in time. Like there was a parking lot and a shuttle that were taking people from the parking lot to the venue, and right after the last shuttle had emptied into the venue, the rain came and it started pouring. But I was just like, yeah, I don't care if it's raining. God doesn't care if it's raining.
I
It's
love that
right,
because it changed my perspective because I was so caught up on I love how God used that, because
right,
it's like sometimes I think in life we get so caught up in the details that you're like, it doesn't matter. God's going to do
right.
what God is going to do. People will show up in the rain. The rain will not keep them away. And I think we even had a conversation is like, if it does keep them away, who cares? The right
Yeah.
people are where, like some people then might miss out on an opportunity because they chose to let rain get in the way. And then, but the
Hmm.
people that showed up are going to get something amazing.
Well, here's the other thing is that the venue we had limited seating.
Right.
And if we had had as many people at this venue as we had at like a previous event that was fairly similar, we wouldn't have been able to fit everybody. So again, my perspective was like, maybe God will send just enough rain so that we can fit everybody who comes in the venue.
Yeah.
So, and it's just, we try to control things so much. And
Mm.
I remember that. And I'm that's so grateful that I was going through that and could share that perspective as you were about to step into a very similar situation, right, with your event. And so, yeah, I think we try to control things, and it's like God's like, A, you're not in control anyway, and B, the less it seems like you're in control, the more people will see what I'm doing, and
Yes.
that's what matters. Is not me. I'm not pointing me, but the more people will see what He's doing, and that's what
Right.
matters.
Yeah, 100% because it ended up raining at my event. And
Right.
what happened though is the women were grateful for the rain because then they were
Ah,
okay
huh,
about being inside. And it kind of created this like cozy environment. And hey, we're
yeah,
all in a room together and we're hearing speakers, we're praising worship, we're eating food, we're fellowshipping. And I if it would have been really nice out, like you would have wanted to be outside. And so it's like sometimes we pray for things that we want because we have this like worldly mindset of what it's going to be and what's going to make something perfect. And God's like, no, I'm a couple of steps ahead of you. And if you trust me and if you have faith, like the rain's actually going to make it better. And that's
yeah,
exactly what happened. So,
yeah,
anyways, thank you for
yeah,
sharing that because there were just so many, again, like how our paths crossed and we had still been, talking and keeping up. And,
yeah.
your response was so good. I loved it and it helped me. So,
Good, good,
um,
good.
continue your story. Sorry.
No, that was really it. I mean, the only other thing I would say is a little tidbit. My daughter actually ended up getting baptized down at that church in Auburn. And I think that was the moment where we went down for that. I don't know if I've been to as powerful of a service as that. Each person, close to 20 of them, got baptized during the service, and each one got up and gave their testimony in front of everybody. And it's things like that to see her growth that she had called us and said, "Hey, I want to get baptized. I'll do it up there at your church." And the church we had been going to at the time, they had a pool outside, and you basically just you walk in the pool, you get dunked, and you walk out, and that's it. It's kind of an assembly line, not lacking in power and meaning, just different. And then she called us later and said, "I think I want to get baptized down here." And we were like, "Okay, why?" She said, "Well, because I have to stand up in front of everybody and give my testimony, and that kind of scares me. And I think that's why I need to do it down here." So it's again things like that to where it confirmed yet again. And I wish I could remember or share all of the little details and tidbits that happened with her down at school that confirmed that that was where she needed to be. But the spiritual growth was worth everything that we went through to for her to go there.
Right. Oh, well, praise the Lord. And I just love like her also, like showing first week of school, finding a church, and showing up and
Amazing.
how important, if there's college students listening to this, of how important it is to get connected to a local church and get involved in the impact that it not only made on your daughter's life the time that she was at Auburn, but your whole family, and
Whole
kind of
family.
this ripple effect that it's had. And I even think of like, just to add on, like our story is we've started doing some stuff for college students and it's like I don't know, you just see God where you're faithful and other people are faithful. And then I don't know, it's just cool to see what God's going to do first in her life, and her obedience there and this church. And like, what are the chances that out of all the places they choose Nashville? And I think and you hadn't you commented like we were talking about like does Nashville really need another church?
Yeah.
And then
Oh
you
yeah.
had a good response of like one that was like led by the Holy Spirit and,
Yeah.
truth based in the Bible. And that was a good reminder of like, oh, yeah, okay. So,
Yeah. 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 I'll be curious to see what God has planned for the future. Because like you said, you have a passion for college students, and you have started like ministry and with college students, and everything I'm seeing, and you're seeing the same thing, is that college age students are hungry
yes.
for someone to tell them the truth.
Yes.
There's
Amen.
so much deception out there, and that's what I've seen. Watching thousands of college students walk into a church with their Bible in hand at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday is so number one, it's so inspiring, but two, again, it highlights that they're searching for something that
Yes.
they're not finding in the world. And we need churches to give it to them. It's the truth. And so yeah, it'll be interesting to see what transpires. Again, that's like this weird seeing this weird little connection between you and I of something's going on with colleges, right? Like the church we go to here in Nashville, again, an offshoot of the Auburn church, which is predominantly college students, but the Nashville church here, 70% of them are 20 somethings, right? They're young professionals because
Wow. Yeah.
they either are former Auburn students or they are friends of someone that has some kind of connection
Right.
to Auburn. Yeah,
Wow, that's cool. I love
crazy.
what God is
Yeah,
doing in the hearts of
yeah,
young people and having this fire to pursue,
yes.
their faith in the truth. So, kind of rapid questions as we wrap up. Is there a praise and worship song that you like to have on repeat right now?
I would say I thought about this one. The one, if I had one to listen to, and I do listen to this when I'm running as well, "Daily Bread" by Pat Barrett and Carrie Job.
Okay, writing that down. I like it.
So again, it's one of those songs that I heard the worship team at church sang, and it's just, yeah, I don't know, it gets me every time.
It speaks to you. You
It
have a
does.
Bible verse that you want to share?
You know, a verse.
I
I
know it's
think
so hard.
I know it's so hard. All right, I'll throw out two. I mean, I
Okay.
could go with the sort of the popular Romans 8:28, and I do love
Yep.
Romans 8:28. All things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to His purpose. I think what I love about it is it highlights God's grace and justice, right? Like uh, I think we tend to think like all things should work for good, but that's not really what it says.
Yeah.
It also doesn't say that all things will work together for good. That's God's grace, that He can work all things together for good, but there's a condition to it, right? That second part of the verse is where His justice comes in. It's like all things work together for good for those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. So to me, it just gives me both that motivation to be obedient and to keep seeking Him, and the hope that if I do that, then even the hard things, even the trials, will work for good. Doesn't mean we won't go through trials, but it will work for good. So that, yeah, I would say, as far as a go-to, that's one. I do want to share one other one where
Yeah, I want
that
to
I've been
real
punt.
quick on the other one is I want to pause there because I hope to have him on as a guest. But one of my longest coaching client, Harold Welter, who is 80, he had a daughter who was killed in a car crash her single year,
Mm,
and they had that verse. They had gotten that, as like a plaque when they were married, and it hung in their house. And so he's like, I saw it every day. And then after
yeah.
she gets killed, he says, "Man, you have to look at that verse differently."
Oh yeah.
And but what he has been able to do over, I think she was killed 20 years, probably, I think around 20 years ago or something, is they can see the goodness and kind of what her legacy and her life and that sort of thing. And so I always remember that, and I hope to have him on because, just like you said, is sometimes we just focus on the good times, and it's like,
Yeah.
nope, there's that verse has a couple of components too that it really tests our faith and our
It
trust in
does.
God. So thank you for sharing
It's
that.
really a gut check of where I took that verse away in my heart a long time ago.
Wow, I love that.
And when you hit a trial in life, it's really an opportunity to where life is asking you the question,
Yeah.
do you actually believe that?
Hmm.
Are you actually going to believe that?
Yeah.
And, the answer needs to be yes, obviously. And so it's helped me through those times to where it's like, do you believe that all things are going to work together for good? And it's like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Gives me hope through the trial, right?
Yeah. I love
Um,
it.
one though that I've been really not pondering, but I love this verse. It's a little obscure. Most people may not be able to cite it, but it's Isaiah 37:21. And Isaiah the prophet is he's talking about King Hezekiah, who's quite underrated in people knowing who he is. He's a great historical figure in the Bible. And Isaiah was given a word from God to go tell the king, King Hezekiah. And so the scripture says, uh, Isaiah sent a message to the king, quote, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel says, because you have prayed to me." And I'll stop it there. And then he goes on to explain what God is going to do because the king prayed to God. And to me, that's one of my favorite examples of of the power of prayer in Scripture. And that we kind of talked a little bit about this. You mentioned something earlier that really struck me that's similar to this, to where prayer isn't going to change the end of the story. We know how this is all going to end, right? We know Jesus's return. It's not going to necessarily change God's will. Prayer won't necessarily change God's will, and that's part of the mystery of prayer. But prayer can and will change our journey through time as God's will unfolds. Prayer can change our participation in His plan.
Yeah.
And that's so that phrase, "because you prayed to me, this is what I'm going to do." I think about that often. Like I would love for a time to hear God's voice and say, "Mike, because you prayed,
Oh,
here's what I'm going to do."
yeah.
You know?
Ooh, I think I'll end it there, my friend. I don't think it gets any better than that. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Only God podcast and sharing your story that only God could write.
Thank you for having me. This is fantastic.
Hey, friends, thank you for joining me today on the Only God podcast. I hope today's story encouraged your faith and reminded you that God is still writing our stories each and every day. If you were inspired by this episode, please share, subscribe, and tell a friend. And to stay connected with me and find out about all my books and resources and events, go to shineforwardcreative.com. Have a fabulous day.